Hello and welcome to this album with me, William Han. It's the podcast / radio show on Islington Radio where each episode a guest and I will deep dive an album of their choice. And we are gonna discuss the songs, we're gonna discuss the shows, we are gonna discuss the artwork. But what I really want to know, Ivo Graham, is when my guest first heard the album of choice and the emotional attachment that they have to the record. And if all goes to plan, we might even have a bit of a laugh while doing it. Now, Ivo. Normally what happens here is I have a beautiful, long meandering intro written about each guest. It's a bit of fun and sort of sets the sort of bar for the day. What I'm going to do instead is read an email I sent you a couple of years back. Now let's see if we can piece this together a little bit. Hello, pigs. Finally, a podcast I can bloody relate to. As an indie weasel that's had his musical coming of age in the swinging 2006s, your talk of group hug dances at Ali Pali in your mid-30s is a wheelhouse I know and I love. Thank you for putting it into an audio format. It's been a treat thus far. However, I'm not just a consumer of your podcast, I'm an architect of it. A few months back, my wife had to drop out of seeing Confidence Man at Coco. I decided to announce the spare ticket on Twitter, hoping to find the tickets home and hopefully claw back the cash. Almost immediately, I had a friend request from Ivo Graham. The Ivo Graham, I thought to myself. Now, this is unnecessarily sassy of me. Isn't he the guy that does the Off-Menu podcast? It was a bit unnecessary. It wasn't necessary, though, sorry. Within moments, it all became clear. He was also looking to have a cool party time with Confidence Man. But he wasn't from Off-Menu. I just had my comedians mixed up. Now, I wanted to get into Coco early, so meeting for an exchange of cash for ticket face-to-face wasn't an option time-wise. But I figured, if I couldn't trust a guy with an Eton education, who could I trust? So I sent the e-ticket, hopeful that Ivo would find 30 seconds in his evening to transfer the money. I actually saw Ivo inside and drunkenly introduced myself, expecting a wad of 20s to grease my palm. They never came. All I had to do was ask 3 times over on Twitter, panic I was being ghosted, wait a week, address him again, and finally, Ivo addressed me and transferred the money. It really was that simple. The show was, of course, excellent, and I gained a follower / future podcast guest. Gig pigs forever!
What a pleasure to listen to that back. May I have my right of reply?
The floor is yours, Ivo. But, it's quite enough of me for one podcast.
No, not at all. And you're quite right to bring it up. And I'm not going to make many excuses for my behaviour. But I actually listened back to this quite recently.
Did you?
Gig Pigs, a music podcast that I've hosted with my dear friend Alex, to which you were such an early email contributor. Just with that? Or were there other comms?
There were other less interesting emails.
Yeah, that was a very so I actually listened back, not really in the listening back business that much, and the Gig Pigs we haven't done any of over the last year. It's on an indefinite hiatus, but we hope to return to it. We had a lot of fun doing it. But I listened back to our 3rd episode with Tom Rosenthal, where we go and watch the band Phoenix, and that happened to be the one. I recently listened back to it, and by coincidence, with this already booked in with you today, that was the one that starts with us reading that email. And obviously, we were just getting started on the podcast. We had some tales to tell. We'd gone to Brussels to watch Phoenix, but also we were very grateful for any sense of that anyone's listening, sure. Anyone's getting in touch, that a community might sprout out of this. And obviously, emails which have such specific, legitimate, not just music opinions, but personal axes to grind are so funny. So Alex was having the time of his life reading that, but I couldn't really believe that so early in our podcast I'd made, however sort of jovially, a sort of an enemy, or at least a debtor. And as I said in my defense to Alex at the time, I mean, there's no defense for it. You do not want, particularly as a Z-list public figure, you have a real responsibility to pay people back immediately. And I'm very sorry if that caused any stress. It was linked to a massively stressful trip to watch Confidence Man at Coco, which didn't even end up being a Gig Pigs episode. Earlier that year, I'd say Confidence Man on the Friday afternoon in the sunshine at Glastonbury.
I was there, Ivo.
Man.
Unbelievable.
I my life is one of music-based hyperbole, but I'm going to say that Confidence Man that Friday afternoon is maybe all-time top 5. That I'd never seen her before. I'd been told they'd be great. They were, fantastic. But also, it was Friday afternoon at Glastonbury, the first Glastonbury after the pandemic. Gorgeous weather. The crowds had cleared a little bit after wet leg, bit more room to move.
That's exactly
and it
right.
was it set the bar so high for a perfect weekend. And so I was very keen to get as many people as possible to watch Confidence Man that autumn. And I remember it was a real Confidence Man moment. They were adding date after date in the autumn, but they were all selling out so quickly. And I told so many people that we were going to go, but so many more people than actually had tickets. So that week was this mad Twitter refreshing spree where I bought multiple secondhand tickets off different people and then had a complete breakdown trying to get into Coco with all the different QR codes. Just about made it, but then by the time we'd resolved that, we were stood very near the back, not really in the thick of it. Confidence Man, great, but not in a position to appreciate it as much.
Yes.
And then in the middle of it, I've got William Hand bloody claiming his wad. I'm good for my wad. Not now, Han. So I'm really sorry that happened, and that may have coloured your own enjoyment of Confidence Man.
Ivo, I'll be honest, if I made you feel bad, there was a bit of embellishment on my part. It may have been 3 days and asking twice.
Like, that is a brilliant email. No fault found in that email or any of those embellishments.
I mean, you got a good 30 minutes out of it on that episode, didn't you?
It was in a podcast where we were constantly unsure of whether to get to the topic in hand versus, what is the priority with a podcast? Are you trying to talk for as long as possible about the band Phoenix for people who've clicked Phoenix? Or are you trying to build a lovely community of music fans who all owe each other different amounts of money? And so getting such a great email to tuck into and haul me over the coals about probably did end up being more of the episode than actually the delicate sort of electro rock vibes of Phoenix themselves, particularly given that Tom Rosenthal didn't actually really like Phoenix very much at all. So Gig Pigs is now on hiatus. You and I hopefully are financially even, and it's such a pleasure to be back here addressing the situation directly, although I've now got a more recent embarrassment, which I don't know whether this is on your agenda as well, but we probably need to talk about Glastonbury.
I think it's important we do. It's important we do.
In the same place, in the park again.
In the park
3
again.
years
We
on.
have been sharing moments in that field, unbeknowingly for the most part. If people were to guess that know me and know you, where we would bump into each other on planet Earth, I would say Sunday afternoon before a Maccabees, Sunday evening I should say, before a Maccabees show at the park stage, would probably be the first guess for anyone that knows our personal brands. How would you get on that day, Ivo? Do you enjoy yourself?
Well, I did enjoy myself.
You enjoyed yourself, yeah?
But I
Tell me more.
So the Maccabees were closing the park on the Sunday night. Confidence Man, for example, were about 2 p.m. on a Friday. So while all of Glastonbury is, a rich trove, and it's on us, the consumer, to pace ourselves accordingly.
Of course.
And we're both marathon runners. Sunday, you're inevitably running on fumes a little bit more. And I had made a particular decision, sort of fumes-wise, on the Sunday, which was causing huge amounts of stress and quite legitimate frustration to everyone around me, far more than if I'd literally just stolen £30 from all of them individually. This was... I mean, do you want to take me through it from your perspective? Who was on? Was it Future Islands before the Maccabees, I think, wasn't it? I'm afraid I don't even recall because of my levels of stress, and we just made it up to the Ribbon Tower.
Yes.
I think we didn't catch anyone who was on before. I think it was in that sort of hour between.
Yeah. So I was stood nearest the Ribbon Tower. I was there with my friends, having a lovely Glastonbury moment. And I've nudged my friend Lewis, and I said, fuck, Ivo Graham over there. Because you're quite easy to spot in a crowd, Ivo. Much like me, you're a tall man.
We're tall men, and I think I was wearing quite a lot of orange at the time as well.
That does sound like
I think
you.
I might have been about to or had just changed from one orange outfit into the other.
Yeah,
and I also
you got to keep them guessing, Ivo.
Yeah. Well, I just was so proud of how many different outfits I brought to Glastonbury, and I also had my orange flare, my smoke flare, which I was going to let off during the Maccabees set. So it's quite a lot of stuff.
Quite a lot going on. And then you're there minding your own business with, I assume, a partner or a friend.
My friend Alethea was there as well. well.
Yeah.
And she'd like to,
Yes.
She was quite embarrassed to be with me.
I really bet. Because after a bit of nudging of my friends, they said, "Oh, you should absolutely introduce yourself. Try and see if you can get him on the podcast, William." And I said,
mission accomplished on that front, at least.
It worked out, didn't it? Not instantly, though. I'd say there wasn't an instant success. No. I've introduced myself, Ivo. Hi, big fan of your work. You might remember me. I emailed your podcast a while back, and I actually host a podcast myself now. And I think you'd be great on my podcast. I think you'd really enjoy doing it. Hello, by the way, so I'm coming a bit hot. How's your Glastonbury going so far? And I was greeted with what can only be described as, the silence. I was greeted with silence and passionate, enthusiastic nodding with a big, warm smile.
Yeah.
I was unsure what to make of it, and then you grabbed your phone.
If you'd paused the story,
I can pause the story
after. No, what I mean is, if you'd paused after, I greeted you enthusiastically. Yeah, I'm not saying this is the most fascinating game in the whole world for your listeners, but I think they'd struggle to guess what what happens next in the story. What happens next is I have to explain via hand gestures and some use of my phone note that I've taken a vow of silence for the day because at sometime at around lunchtime, I'd lost my voice quite badly after the inevitable exertions of 48 hours on the farm, and in the midst of a conversation with my sister, who had been looking after me for the first part of the day, about how I might preserve my voice for the evenings in action, I suggested that I could just try and not talk all day. I think it was partly in response to having lost my voice and partly in response to having been told off for chatting too much too. And I quote my sister, anyone and everyone. Which, that's Glastonbury. You're in the best place on earth. You're having a whale of a time, and you are just bumping into friends,
podcast listeners,
like-minded podcast listeners, podcast hosts, and you've always got something to talk about because of you've just seen or you're about to see, and I just love that aspect of it. I wish that it, of course, lasted for 7 days rather than 3, or however long one could make it last. But I'd burnt out on the Sunday, so it became a game quite quickly. I said to my sister, "Okay, I'll say nothing today. I'll do exactly what." Because also, I find the choice paralysis of Glastonbury exhausting. Sure. I knew that I wanted to watch the Maccabees that evening because they're very dear to me, of course. Recently reunited. I'm very excited to loosely become pals with Felix of late. I'd got an orange smoke flare. I'd texted Felix about it. That's where I wanted my day to end. But until then, I said, I'll go with the flow and I won't impose myself. I'll only impose myself in the way that someone who refuses to talk and therefore, of course, makes most situations about his refusal to talk becomes an imposition. And so a series of people had to become, the expression we used was the driver, where basically they were just looking after me, explaining the situation.
The drive is a great name for that. I love that.
So, so I'd make the sort of, I made a glossary of sign language in my phone notes. And yeah, my sister had abandoned me to my friend Thea at some point in the mid-afternoon, who had had a pretty tough old time of it, I think, at Snow Patrol and Parcels. And then we'd made our way up to the park. The end of the Vow of Silence project was in sight, and yet some of its biggest tests. I still wanted to do all of the flair-related business as well. I think I'd made some rules, like I was allowed to speak sort of 3 times over the I had credits. I'm afraid I didn't use any of my credits on you. I knew I had to save them for later in the day.
Ivo, can I surprise you? I am extremely shocked this was a choice. I assumed you just completely lost your voice from so many cigarettes and alcohol and screaming out to indie bangers. The fact that this was a choice,
there was, as I say,
it absolutely rocked me.
It originated as I sort of have lost my voice. But not to the extent that, I literally cannot speak.
That's what I thought this whole time.
I think I probably should have let that ignorance bloom a little longer, because it's so much ruder to be exactly. No,
I'm choosing not to speak to you for pretty much no reason at all.
Not you specifically, William. I don't think it's rude to say that when I made my vow, approximately 6 hours earlier, you were far from my mind. But by that point, I'd subjected so many close family members to it that it would have been mad to break the vow
for this guy,
just to arrange a meeting on this album, which I was sure we could hammer out over DM once the dust had settled.
Mission accomplished, Ivo.
Yeah.
Mission accomplished.
So sorry again.
Yeah. I really like the Maccabees as well. I was half expecting you to choose the Maccabees as your album of choice today, if I'm being honest, Ivo.
Well, I'd have loved to chat about which one would I have chosen. I think probably the third one, Given to the Wild, is. I don't think necessarily I would recommend it would be the first Maccabees album I would recommend, but I think it was the one that I became most sort of obsessed with as their newfound maturity, the slightly more sort of Arcade Fire, sort of sweeping soundscapes of it all, and how just obsessively I listened to it during the emotionally delicate final few months at university. But I love the full catalogue. I love Felix White's writing so much. I would recommend his 2 books about cricket and football, but also interweave with stories of the Maccabees and his mum's MS. I think they're stunning. I think he's a real Renaissance man. I love that they're back. I hope to see them again. But I was so pleased. I'd also got the sort of inside track because I texted him a bit about like where are they going to be at Glastonbury, and I was having that chat which I dare say we've both had so many times with friends about like where would you most want to be at Glastonbury? What's your dream slot? And when Felix had said we're closing the park on the Sunday, and I was like, yeah, I think that's exactly what you want to do. And it's tough because I think my brother went to see The Prodigy and had a whale of a time, and a few of my friends went to see, I think, Over Mono, who brought out David Balfe to do that incredibly moving I Have a Love sort of rave remix about his dead friend, which I think is one of the most incredible sort of dance poetry crossovers that I would have loved to have seen that live. But that's Glastonbury. You have got, I can't even remember. Oh, and then Olivia Rodrigo on the main stage. I mean, like... Oh,
5 great nights out, aren't they?
Yeah,
wow.
and I remember resenting it. It's actually, I found Friday at Glastonbury last year, it was one of the few times I've ever been at Glastonbury being like, I really don't think I'm remotely invested in a single headliner here. And
who was the headliner that year?
I think on the Friday we ended up going to watch a bit of Marabou State at the Back, which is not exactly bang, we're at Glastonbury. I mean, they were great, and actually I should have gone to watch Fortet, or I should have put my doubts and my grudges to one side and just enjoyed the shameless pop flourishes of the 1975 with my pals. I bet it had a few redeeming features.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I had a really nice time, Ivo.
And
but I am an apologist for 1975.
Yeah, and listen, if we can't forgive our 21st century frontmen their sort of vanities, then what the hell are we doing devoting a podcast to the Arctic Monkeys? But anyway, by the Sunday, I'd had a great weekend. I'd lost my voice, but I was still going to let off my orange flare at the Maccabees, and I thought they were great. But I don't want to talk about them with you. I want to talk about the Arctic Monkeys because our worlds are so clearly entwined around the Arctic Monkeys story more than anyone else's. And I was such a big fan of the episode that you did about the debut album last year for the anniversary. I got involved in quite a lot of debut album 20th anniversary stuff as well. I hosted a club night around it, and I plan to host a club night around Favourite Worst Nightmare, which I'd like this to be the hard launch for. I would very much like you in attendance for.
Well, I'll be honest.
Let's go.
Right.
Favourite Worst Nightmare.
Let's do this. Okay. Calm, collected, commanding. But enough about Ivo Graham. We've got an album to discuss. Arctic Monkeys' second album asked the question, how do you follow up a once-in-a-lifetime generational breakthrough? With more of the same, but faster and louder, but also softer and quieter too, please, and also songs that are nothing like anything on the first album. Favourite Worst Nightmare was a chart-topping, Mercury-nominated success upon its release in 2007, just 16 months after the record-breaking debut from Arctic Monkeys. There's songs about lust. There's songs about longing, and there's songs about a man that paired a tie with a t-shirt in a way millennials had never seen done before. D might be for delightful, but P is a podcast. Let's get on with the show, Ivo Graham.
Incredible. What a beautiful, I'm there all over again. And I love the 16-month thing because I don't think there's many things I've said about any music more in the last 20 years than just breathlessly emphasizing to people how quickly the Arctic Monkeys turned around Favourite Worst Nightmare. I think I just find that so thrilling, particularly given that we live in the age of bigger delays. And, when you think about the Beatles, as my dad will always say, the fact that the Beatles' entire story, which has changed the course of popular culture, takes place over 5 or 6 years.
Crazy.
And, the standard album cycle now in the 21st century is every 2 or 3 years in the Arctic Monkeys. Now we're in a sort of they're almost on high, sort of retired themselves, but the fact that they came back so quickly, and I think it is. And I'd love to get into the details of the album and where we both were and what specific bits we obsessed over. But basically, whenever I've been asked, and I say whenever I've been asked, often I'm just initiating the conversation myself. I think it's my favourite Arctic Monkeys album. Partly because the songs stand up on their own so well, but also because I think it is an even more impressive achievement. I mean, they wrote the first album clearly so fast, so productively, so wildly when they were, teenagers, and that's thrilling. But to then have all of the hype and all of the pressure, and to be in the midst of touring the first, and to make an album that is so confident, and this, word which I've stolen from a million different reviews, but so muscular as well. It's so, it's such a beast.
I thought we were going to have a lovely conversation, aren't we, Ivo? When I read that intro, you said, I'm right there. Where is there?
Well, I mean, I'm there listening to Favourite Worst Nightmare, but I suppose if you are going to pin me down geographically, then...
And metaphorically as well. Psychologically, literally, geographically, all of it, please.
Well, psychologically... I think, unfortunately, that does still come back to the geography, which is Eton College.
Eton College, okay.
And I'm just reading The Enemy, which I'm probably subscribing to by that point. But if not, I'm reading it in the school library, where you could just where they would subscribe. Basically, you could request a subscription to a magazine, or indeed you could request that the school library would buy CDs. And they would almost always buy them. So there was this astonishing economy of boys just getting the library to buy CDs and then taking them back to their sort of boarding houses to burn them onto their laptops, which was definitely, I wouldn't say that was the main cause of the decline in album sales in the UK, but it certainly didn't help matters. So I didn't have a life, really, outside of the boarding school. Certainly not in 2006, when the first album came out. And so much of that first album story is tied to, getting the demos on MySpace. And you tell this story very, very vividly in your episode about it, which I dare say your listeners have already listened to, but I would recommend again, because it's that feeling of like, oh, I thought I was already into noughties indie to a massive extent. And like I was pretty radicalized by Franz Ferdinand and Razorlight. Like I had my own room in the boarding house, dormitories at prep school, at junior school, and then the huge step up for Eton was having my own room, my own CD player, and a small collection of CDs which I would just hammer on repeat. And so I associate the first Razorlight album and the first Franz Ferdinand album and the Keen album. That's 2004, is those on rotation. And then 2005 is the Arcade Fire album and the Bloc Party album. And then in the autumn, the second Franz Ferdinand album, which I think is also a phenomenal achievement. And there's a sentence from the Q review of that album, which Alex and I have sort of discussed on Geek Big so much, which is that Q magazine said that with regards to the second Franz Ferdinand album, you could have it so much better, that its greatest hits feel is both its biggest strength and its biggest weakness. And the amount of time and mental energy I spent as a teenager to trying to work out what that meant. It's like, what does that mean? I mean, I'm sure they know what they're talking about because they're professional music journalists and I'm just some, closeted teenager at boarding school. But like, they're saying that the album is too good for its own good. But I sort of did get it. Like, it's... I've not gone back to it as much, and is that because almost Q warned me off it? It was like, this is popcorn. It doesn't have a depth to it. But nonetheless, back they'd come, so confident, so much swagger. So I loved that second Franz Ferdinand album, and I was hammering these CDs. And the Bloc Party album, even though I think they're I'm going to use the word decline, I think makes me sadder than many of their peers, is just because it's a decline from such a high peak. Yeah. But I was obsessed with so much stuff, but I was obsessed with it I'm reading this newspaper in the school library, and then I'm getting the CD either at HMV in Windsor or because I'm asking the school library to buy it, and then I'm burning it. And then suddenly everyone's talking about MySpace, which I don't have, but there are these demos floating around which I don't have access to. And the closest I came to being ahead of the curve was going to I think Virgin Megastore on the King's Road, of course, in December 2005 to get the I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor CD single. And then I was sort of ready. And then I was counting down the days till the album. And then that was 2006. And by 2007, maybe I was starting to have I was 16, starting to have a bit more aspiration towards like any sort of independence outside of school. And I went to see the Arctic Monkeys at a music festival in Switzerland.
Tell me everything about this experience,
2007, because I'm afraid to say that's where my family lived at the time. So I boarded in England, went to Switzerland for my holidays, and while going to like Reading Festival remained a distant dream. My parents agreed that they would drop me and my friends Jack and Julian off at Open Air St Gallen on the Friday. And then they would come and pick us up on the Sunday, which would include watching Arcade Fire and Snow Patrol with us on the Sunday. So we had our independent, and I remember being so excited. If you just consider these headlines as a teenage in 2007, and I think your Instagram bio is... The problem with 2007 is you can only have one of them. Is that right? I've misquoted that.
That's about right. That's the problem with 2007s. You only get
one of them. Like, wow. I read that and I thought, yep.
Do you want to know how I got that? I made an off-the-cuff comment on an Instagram story, and Rajiv Korea, former guest, loved it. And I thought, okay, well, if he's got his approval. So
Rajiv, the Rajiv stamp of approval is always emboldens you.
Yes.
And a wonderful man with impeccable taste. So 2007, and we get to watch on the Friday night. We arrive late, but just in time for Klaxons at 1 a.m. We're in St Gallen, a place I've only previously known as somewhere that probably Chelsea played away in the Intertoto Cup or something. But it's the place I get to watch Klaxons at 1 a.m. And I think I fear that for Klaxons more than any other band we reference, that quote about 2007s is particularly apposite.
I think that's fair.
And as whenever you anyone sticks it to a band that had one golden summer or one golden single or indeed one golden strand,
if you will,
I think it's important to emphasize, like, many of us don't even get one. Like they came, they saw, they won the Mercury Prize, they invented a genre co-invented a genre of indie rave, which clearly was so quickly thrown under the bus by the time I was old enough to sort of be even able to go to clubs in London. But if I was of age in 2007, I would have been right in the humiliating thick of indie rave. I would have been dispensing glow sticks.
Would you like to hear my new rave confession?
Please.
I once went to a Klaxons gig supported by Metronomy.
Oh, yes.
They'd done 2 gigs that day, an under-18s one and an over-18s one. I was at the over-18s one. That's not my confession either. But glow sticks were a thing, right? Glow sticks were an important part of a Klaxons gig. A friend of mine had a toy lightsaber, and I brought a massive glowing lightsaber to a Klaxons gig. But the problem was I was enjoying myself so much. By the time I got to the gig, the batteries had run out, Ivo. So
the hype. Anticipation has a habit. That's incredible.
It was a great time.
It was going to be either that or you split it open in excitement and ruined a favourite shirt, as I did at Latitude 2015.
I've ruined many a favourite shirt of a glow stick in my time, I don't mind telling you.
But similarly, obviously new rave is dead, but I've spent so much of the last few years, and even like Confidence Man are a band that sort of exist at that sort of, in some ways, quite sort of fun and cool, and in some ways slightly sort of garish, sort of nether zone between sort of rock and pop. So I loved Klaxons. We watched them at 1 a.m. and then on the Saturday it was Bloc Party, Arctic Monkeys, Kaiser Chiefs. And
Ivo, I'm there.
And then the following day, my parents are coming to watch the Arcade Fire and Snow Patrol with us. So it was an amazing weekend, and I think because of that, Favourite Worst Nightmare, as well as its own merit, it's got that thing of it was the Arctic Monkeys album I saw live, and then I wouldn't see them again for many years actually, and they were so young, and we were on the barrier because it was quite a sort of polite Swiss music festival where you really could negotiate your way to the front quite easily, and there they were, and I just found that so exciting as well, that they were like, they were already a bit cooler and a bit more sure of themselves by 2007. But as a teenager, I had a lot of acne myself. I loved how spotty the Arctic Monkeys were. I found it very reassuring.
Well, that leads on quite nice. I was going to ask you about inspiration fashion-wise from Arctic Monkeys. Have you slicked your hair back or put on a leather jacket in any kind of Alex Turner-esque manner?
Only in January of this year when I put on a leather jacket for the AM section of 20 Years of Whatever.
So tell me more about this club night, Ivo. You sort of mentioned it briefly, but I think we should get into the nuts and bolts of this.
Well, I'm very sorry that you weren't there, but I feel very confident that you'll be an integral part on the 23rd of April, I believe, 2027 of 20 Years of Nightmares.
Locked in.
I think anniversaries need to be chronicled. I think we don't do enough full album listens. And obviously, as indie nostalgics, we do get the opportunity quite a lot with varying degrees of tragedy to watch our favourite bands of yesteryear perform those albums.
Bloc Party, if you're listening.
Bloc Party, of course, thanks for making one of my favourite albums of all time. And of course, I'm so pleased that you're able to monetize it indefinitely. But it's sad how little luster Silent Alarm in full, even though I've never actually seen Silent Alarm in full, but I'm not chasing that down as I might have thought that I would back in 2005. I saw them a couple of times in the noise when they were so ferociously tight. And I think the lineup change sort of it removed a little bit of the magic for me. Respect to the new members, but it's not obviously quite the same. And the recent albums, not quite the same. And with the Arctic Monkeys, you've got this extra thing where you do get to hear the old stuff, but as well as it being interspersed with some pretty divisive new stuff. And I haven't heard your episode about Tranquility Base with CMB because it hasn't come out yet. But you've told
glowingly positive, don't you worry.
Yeah, he's a fantastic... And in fact, he was at... So Christopher MacArthur Boyd came to 20 Years of Whatever, and I'm not sure if he even actually stuck it out for Mirable, so he's not that big of a fan, and he knew where it was coming because it was a chronologically organised night. I love chronologically organised night. But I saw Arctic Monkeys... Did you see them at Glastonbury 2023?
That's one I missed. I wasn't there that year. I watched it at Glastonbury at my brother Jack's house.
Very nice.
I crowd surfed in his living room.
As you must. and what song did you, or hypothetically, would you have crowd surfed to?
It wasn't hypothetical. It was literal.
Oh, great.
During Are You Mine?
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I put his window out.
Great. Really?
No, that's
okay.
True. Everyone else is true, though. I did crowd surf, yeah.
So that's the closer, I think.
I believe that's right, yep.
And... It's impeccable, and that's a leather jacket, of course, and that great video where him and Helders are in the car, and you're wearing a Helders bound shirt, which is really lovely. And I'm annoyed that I've not brought to your visualized podcast a couple of my own Arctic Monkeys shirts, but that Helders bound shirt is a lovely touch.
It's a good shirt, isn't it?
And also, it's just a very fetching shirt, even if anyone doesn't care about Matt Helders' drumming and photography, although they should. So, yeah, him and Helders in the car in the Are You Mine video, leather jacket, sunglasses, doing that sort of like looking to the back and doing that like the thing.
Great dicking about, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all time dicking about. And whereas I'm not such a fan of. It's tangent after tangent, I'm afraid, but I've never quite warmed to the Turner Kane dicking about. So it's a bit too leering and a bit too laddie, and I love the Scott Walker classicism of the Last Shadow Puppets, particularly the first album, but I've never felt that the music quite justifies the ego with them, whereas Alex Turner and Matt Helders in the back of the car with their shades on can do no wrong. But with that, I don't know what you were saying at Glastonbury 2023, but the talk around us at our favourite tree by the pyramid was a mood of impatience, because not only did people not really like Sculptures of Anything Goes or Perfect Sense, beautiful song, but they also were finding it difficult to sing along to the oldies because he's playing them a bit slower and he's crooning them, and songs are allowed to evolve, but if you literally can't sing along to them because of the pacing, people are getting itchy and frustrated. And I think it was a 3-star show. I
think there were some missteps I'll try that again. Some missteps set list wise on that show, unfortunately.
And fair play if they didn't. If we're not allowing them to evolve, we don't get maybe we don't get Favourite Worst Nightmare, maybe we don't get AM, and maybe, we don't get the genuine like fascination of the jazz albums. And he's an icon, and icons don't tend to stand still. That sounds so sycophantic, but like I think that is that there is a sort of basic truth to that. And he'd just come back, he'd had laryngitis. They'd had to cancel some stadium shows. We were lucky he was there at all.
Yeah.
But so I think I really wanted to do something fun for the anniversary of Whatever People Say I Am, That's What I'm Not. And unlike Silent Alarm or the Maximo. I've forgotten the name of Maximo Park's debut.
I watched it in full about a month ago.
Yes,
A Certain Trigger.
I'd like to apologise to Paul and the boys. I watched the 10-year anniversary of it. I didn't watch the 20, but unlike those, I was like, I don't think the Arctic Monkeys are going to be playing a 20-year anniversary of it. And judging by Glastonbury a couple of years ago, even if we get to see those songs live again, which we probably won't, and even if you see, the album is so packed that you're not going to get to hear You Probably Couldn't See for the Lights, but you were looking straight at me ever again. And if you did, it's going to be some jazz version. So let's book out a club, play it in full, put as many noughties clips of reality TV and news on the screen as possible, and then use the rest of the night. We had the first hour was early noughties sort of hype, chronologically building up to it. The section called What's Gone Before. And then the ruckus, the album in full. And then sort of basically the 20 years since, sort of proportional to demand. So a few songs from Favourite Worst Nightmare, a couple from Suck It and See and Humbug and AM. I've got those two the wrong way around, but yes. And then not much Tranquility Base.
Not great for the dance floor, I'd argue.
No, and also a few wrangles about how much to even intersperse, because it was interspersed with other adjacent indie, but actually the catalogue is so deep with the Arctic Monkeys that you didn't really want to stray too far from just listening to them by that point. Although by the time we were in Favourite Worst Nightmare territory, I was also very keen, as if the Favourite Worst Nightmare night was going to be like the following day rather than
14 months later,
and attended probably many different people. I was still saying to people, no, we're not using up all. I was insistent that we weren't going to have 505, despite great public demand. So I was like, it's not about that. It's we save Favourite Worst Nightmare for 20 years of nightmares. We're going to have a sprinkling and nothing more before we move through the chronology. But it was such a fun night, and it was so, and it was such a fun night thanks to the Arctic Monkeys and the perfect album they delivered us in January 2006. But I also think the devotion, as you've showed with this podcast, and as we have shown with our various acts of fandom over the years, but the devotion to just all being in a room for one specific purpose, to listen to that album in full. It was brilliant, and there's not that many albums I would confidently build a whole night around.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we're going to do 20 years of Humbug in August 2009. Sorry, 2029. But
but I can't wait to find out.
Cross that bridge.
Is Arctic Monkeys' best song on this album, Ivo?
It is for me.
Tell me.
And this song is making it. I mean, I'm prepared to accept by many measurements that a lot of people will say 505 is, it's so epic, it's so mature,
so unexpected.
It's so unexpected. It's such an incredible closer, and it has what's been so great about staying with the Arctic Monkeys is new albums bringing new generations aboard. And that thing of you get to AM and suddenly there's all these people, a depressing amount of years younger than you, who mainly know them from AM, which is why I was very keen to put on a leather jacket to go back to a question of
in case the millennials didn't understand the reference.
Yeah, no, so I did try and have this chronological thing on the night where I said, right, I'm going to put on a T-shirt and tie for the Favourite Worst Nightmares song, and that will be the main dress code for 20 years of Nightmares. And then when we played Are You Mine, I put on a leather jacket, which I bought that day, and I've not really returned to since, but I now own a leather jacket because of that. So, and 505, there's such demand for it because, as well as how great it was at the time, I believe, I say sounding a million years old, that it's become very big on TikTok all over again.
I believe it's a TikTok smash.
But may I say, William, that for all of that, if you want devastating levels of second album maturity and a sort of cinematic scope from our, prodigious 19-year-old icons, may I point you the way of track 7, Do Me a Favour?
You may.
For me,
you may.
That's my favourite Arctic Monkeys song. And that was the one that I was not prepared to save for 16 months. And we did 2 of these 20 Years of Whatever nights in London, and then the following weekend in Manchester. And Do Me a Favour was epic both times. Because you've got, both that and 505 have got these outros, but Do Me a Favour, and I used to drum to it. Another thing that I was doing in 2007 was my dad's a drummer and we had a kit at home, and I was sort of deluding myself that I could drum, and I didn't delude myself that I was Matt Helders, but even just trying to keep up with Brian Storm and This House is a Circus is quite fun. And Do Me a Favour, you've got that driving beat, that cinematic aura to the whole thing, and then that pause, and then you're just smashing the drums to tear apart the ties that bind. Perhaps Fuck Off might be too kind. And I'm in Manchester. In London, I think I was shouting that into quite a lot of different people's faces, mainly the comedian Sally Ray B, who loves that song. And in Manchester, just an absolutely colossal stranger called Elliot, who had picked me out earlier in the night and said, I know you love Do Me a Favour. Essentially, he'd booked me on his dance card for that. And I was delighted. He said, we're doing Do Me a Favour. And in coronavirus times, it would have been unsafe, the amount of the proximity.
Yeah.
That's my favourite. What's your favourite, William?
Lovely answer, but it's the wrong answer, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Ivo. It's the wrong answer. The best Arctic Monkey song is Star Treatment from the much misunderstood Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino.
Christopher McCuther-Boyd is not on your sofa now.
There's no blood in his hands. It's fine. This is a self-imposed decision.
Wow.
It is my favourite Arctic Monkey song.
Listen,
he just wanted to be one of the Strokes.
We all just wanted to be one of the Strokes, but you've made a mess if you're really...
Have I fucked it?
No, I don't think you've fucked it. I need to go back to... So would you take Tranquility Base over the car? This is my one, this is a sort of minor debate, because I'm probably still placing them both.
I think I would.
And in the sort of bottom of the pile. And I think Tranquility Base had the shock factor, and I think the car, I was annoyed. I think by the car, I decided, and again, we're saying to anyone who would listen, I think it's brilliant how many different things they've got in the locker. Now they have to be on a one for them, one for us rotation. So it was like, 5 years and another jazz album. And I think a lot of people felt that with the car.
No, I get that.
Whereas Tranquility Base is great, and I think the first half of that album is stunning.
Yeah, particularly those first 2 songs, absolutely unbelievable. That in 1 point perspective.
Yeah,
phenomenal stuff. One of Alex's best guitar solos on that as well, I'd say. But that's
it's 1 point perspective. Which one has the trainer's the excuse was accepted by, oh my god, I can't even remember what that.
It's funny you say this, right? Because my friends love this. I still don't understand what it means. The trainer's explanation was
accepted by the steward.
So it's to do with horse racing. And
I'm afraid I've been on Lyric Genius and I've read that, and I think there's this lovely story of his granddad, I think,
that's
being a horse
right.
racing man, just
yes,
saying
yes.
That's a nice line. You can use that in something, and him just squirreling it away, which I love it. I didn't love it well enough not to butcher the lyric, but I think that's American Spores. It's a great first half of the album, but I don't know.
Bat Phone's a bit shit, isn't it?
The comedian Glenn Moore's favourite song on the album is Bat Phone.
Fucking Glenn Moore.
A wonderful comedian, and if anyone is deep enough into the Arctic Monkeys universe to say the sentence, my favourite song on the album is Bat Phone, then you have to put some respect on it. But it's a mad choice.
Well, this is a conversation I could have had with Glenn Moore recently. I viewed his house recently. Me and the wife moved house, and we were looking at houses around a certain area of London, which will remain nameless.
Very respectful.
But I've actually moved 3 doors down from what was his house. I assume he's now moved, but he was a potential. It was very funny. Wow. But in fact, it's quite funny. I went in this house not knowing it was his house, and I saw your face on the wall from his wedding.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And worked backwards to work out whose house I was in.
Amazing.
And
what a fun game.
It was
like
a lot
like a
of
big
fun.
group shot.
Big group shot. Loads of comedians.
Yeah, okay.
I've gone, whoa.
Yeah.
This is of interest.
So
and
what,
I sort of
what are you doing then? You're sort of working from the wedding dress and working backwards?
That's exactly what I did. It was so funny. And what was like the big hint for me? I think it didn't work out who they were. And I saw an award for Richard Osman's House of Games.
Incredible! What a joy! What a through the keyhole delight!
It was a bonkers. It was so funny.
What House of Games prize was it?
It was the trophy, the actual award.
Oh, the actual
itself.
trophy.
Yeah.
Great.
His house was a circus. There
Great.
you go. Was that any good? Was that any good, Ivo?
Yeah, I think it's.
Was that any good?
I think it's perfect. Actually.
Perfect.
And I think. Yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm afraid associate Glenmore with the phrase "berserk as fuck." He's, he's a phenomenally energetic performer and fits more gags into an hour than anyone else. But he's in some ways also quite a sort of like eccentric chap. And I think the bat phone thing was the cherry on the cake for me, because he's full of these, great little noughties indie vignettes. So you must get him on the pod.
Well, I did DM him and said,
I'm in your house.
I'm in your house. Would you like to come on my podcast? He never got back to me.
It's an amazing way. I think second only to caught you mute at Glastonbury, or indeed you still owe me 30 quid for that Confidence Man ticket. Come on my podcast.
I've got some weird links for comedians, haven't I? It turns out, yeah, weird that. What's the worst bit of this album, Ivo Graham?
So there's a song which I've been on sort of enough like Reddit threads and stuff about the album to almost posit the phrase that it is agreed to be the worst song on the album. And is there a song in your mind when I say that?
I know which songs might divide opinion.
Okay,
I'm not saying it's my opinion.
Okay, we'll do a 3, 2, 1, and we'll say it at the same time. You ready?
I'm ready.
3, 2, 1.
D is for dangerous. Oh, it's the bad thing. The bad thing is the correct answer. Sorry, you are right. It's the bad thing.
No, I don't. Listen, I'm not being like, no, I think we've proven that there isn't an answer. Although I love D is for dangerous, and I even referenced it in an email to you earlier today.
I referenced it in my notes.
Well, exactly.
There you go. It's an iconic but very silly line, isn't it?
D is for delightful. Try and keep your trousers on. Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting. Like the Arctic Monkeys and specifically Alex Turner, as as romantic figures, and there is just astonishing levels of poetry in places in this album for a teenager, and in 505, in Do Me a Favour, in the genuinely moving romance of Only Ones Who Know, even though I'm not rushing to that. I think it's a lovely mid-album ballad.
I'm glad it exists.
And sorry to keep banging on about 20 years of whatever, but during Riot Van, a room which had convulsed to every bar of the first 6 songs, then stood and I'd arranged with my friend Tom Lambert that we were going to make a big circle and we were going to sway to Riot Van, and it was magical. And then you're straight back in for Red Light. And similarly for Only Ones Who Know, what a lovely breather that will be.
I look forward to swaying with you.
Yeah, it'll be truly. I love the thought that we're discussing this. That it's definitely going to happen. That maybe people will listen to this and they'll come, and we're gonna shoot for, I'd say, a medium-sized venue for this one. Anyway, plug over. Very romantic lyrics, but then there's also some of it is inevitably a bit charmless, and that comes with arrogance, and no one has more right to be arrogant than 19-year-old Alex Turner. But there's I've read about the first album that Still Take You Home maybe is a little bit sort of
one of my favourites.
It's such a great song,
fun,
but it's if you're on absolute cancel mode, then that's maybe not some of the more charming romantic politics of the first album. But it's 2006. Of course they're going out trying to get laid.
Old.
Come on. I would have
been
been too if I'd had enough restaurant leave. That was the only grounds on which we were allowed into Windsor on a Saturday night. Restaurant leave, 1 pint. But if your housemaster could smell it on your breath when you came home,
it's a different culture. Trouble. It's a different culture.
Anyway, so then D is for delightful and try to keep your trousers on. Fine, bit of fun. Bad thing is about. It's about sort of having sex with a married. It's with a married woman.
Well, there was rumours. I remember it being at the time that Kate Moss came to a gig, and there was a theory that Kate Moss was the woman.
Take off your wedding ring. Who's Kate Moss wearing? Is she married in 2007?
Is she with Jamie Hewlett at that point?
Maybe she.
No, it would have been Pete Doherty era, I guess, wouldn't it?
I think
maybe a bit of poetic license as well. Though.
No, well, I'm sorry to be pedantic, but yes, I mean the thought of Alex Turner cucking Pete Doherty.
The enemy would be rubbing their hands together, wouldn't they?
I if they could fit Alex Turner and Pete Doherty onto more covers in 2007 than they already did, but I am.
Also, it's quite funny for an 18-year-old, 19-year-old to call sex the bad thing.
The bad thing.
That is literally what his granddad would have called it.
And with the phrase, because isn't the bad thing, that's the thing in Peep Show, isn't it? About, like, don't they have a big, maybe I'm misremembering, there's a whole Peep Show episode sort of where Jez and Supans are trying to remember some, lost night in and what the bad thing was. Anyway, we mustn't get bogged down in that, but I don't think there are many actually bad moments on Favourite Worst Nightmare, and I've revisited a bit of the reviews when it came out for this, as I'm sure you have, and there's a little bit of Brainstorm and the sort of first few tracks of the album get a bit of a kicking.
Really?
Because, well, I mean, you've nominated at least D is for Dangerous, but the idea that Brainstorm is... It's not. I mean, in some ways, it's got plenty of melody because even if it's just da 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 da, when 100,000 massively relieved people at Glastonbury, or indeed a few massively relieved people at Glastonbury 2023, are bellowing that, because that was, I think they came out, confused people with sculptures, and then you're into Brainstorm, and people go, right, we're home,
we're off.
It's a phenomenal riff. I'm trying to drum along to it in 2007, and I'm finding it absolutely thrilling. But maybe compared to what is to come, it's not the most inventive. There's this theme as well of Alex Turner already sort of too cool for his industry, taking pot shots at posers, the sort of evolution of Fate Tales of San Francisco into Brainstorm, and then the fact that it's 3 or 4 just sort of fast-paced, slightly interchangeable songs. And then out of nowhere, it's Fluorescent Adolescent, and that's where the album acquires its second gear.
Yeah.
I just sort of disagree with all of that. I think it is a just thrilling start to an album, and it doesn't really pause for breath until Only Ones Who Know. And I love D is for Dangerous. Teddy Picker it's not my favourite Arctic Monkeys single, but it's a single. It's beloved.
Fun. It's a really fun one.
I think it's Celiray B's. Again, it's her story to tell, not mine, but I think it's her favourite Arctic Monkeys song. Balaclava is not quite as good as D is for Dangerous for me, but it's still great. I think the album comes out of the blocks. As I say, it's so muscular. It's so relentless. It's so funny. And I guess how much of an appetite you've got for those lyrics about the industry depends on how much sort of meta commentary you like in general. Like, what's your feelings on in Teddy Picker? It wasn't in the top 100 list. I think even in 2007, I was like, yeah, okay, that's funny, because I obviously care more about top 100 lists than certainly anyone else in my year at Eton, and probably more than most other people in the world. But I'm like, I'm not sure I want the Arctic Monkeys to be referencing the top. That's a bit too looking through the camera straight at me for me. In the same way that then, 15 years later, I didn't love that they had a song called 4 out of 5. I don't know why. That always rankled with me a bit. And I never took that song. For me, that's where Tranquility Base, even though it's the single.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would find that the more palatable number.
Yeah, no, for me, it's game over there for me. So I'm not too fussed about that. And for me, my favourite songs on the album are Do Me a Favour, 505, and probably This House is a Circus.
That's my favourite. Yeah. This House is a Circus sounds like nothing else they've done. It's got, if you break the pieces down of the different guitar parts, they're really weird. I don't know how they've written and created that song, because that riff on its own is very odd.
Yeah.
No one's going to go, that's the thing, let's work around completely. That. Even the guitar solo is mad, just 2 notes. Yeah. It's got all these weird little parts that don't work on their own, but collectively, it's probably the most thrilling Arctic Monkey song that's ever been written.
I find it
I fucking love it.
Absolutely thrilling. There's a particular, Yeah, for me, it's the bass line bit where it dum 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 bum 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 bum. And speaking of which, may I ask, what were your feelings? The major change between Arctic Monkeys V1 and V2. Did you mourn the departure of Andy Nicholson? Did you feel that much?
Well, yeah, change is hard, right?
Yep.
Change is hard.
Oh yes.
And they were so special to me, and that change in any way felt really difficult. And I would say that first show at Reading 2006, when I saw 2006, and not seeing Andy up there was kind of unusual. But then by the time I watched them in 2007 at the Astoria, when they debuted a load of these songs, I got over it pretty quickly, I'd say.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed one of the first interviews they did, where Zane Lowe just goes, right, first question for Nick, how does it feel to win the lottery?
Wow, I'd forgotten that. That's great.
Looks tea in the park or something, but yeah. I mean, what else do you ask the man that's won the lottery?
Yeah, and I guess it sort of was the lottery, but then, you don't know. The first album felt like it was too big for them not to be massive for ages, and too full of promise for them not to become a great band. But, it could have been a sort of Bloc Party situation where it's slightly diminishing returns, and I don't know if it's nailed on to even to someone as prophetic as Zane Lowe in 2006 that we're going to be still sat on a sofa 20 years later talking about the Arctic Monkeys with the fascination that people do. Because Andy Nicholson, he's in those iconic early photos, and we must be grateful to him for giving us that first album and those bass lines. And I'd say Ritz to the Rubble is my favourite song on the first album, and I think it goes toe-to-toe with Do Me a Favour, even though it's a much more flippant song, and it's just about queuing to get into a club. But I adore that song, and his bass drives that song. But there is that thing where Nick O'Malley comes in, and as you say, it's not just for the second album. He's coming in almost still for the sort of massive bloom of the first album and all those big summer dates, and then it's like so actually the Nicholson percentage of the story is shriveling to such a small early percentage so quickly, and now that's been the for 19 years.
My heart goes out to that guy. I can only imagine how difficult his life had been after that. But the mad thing was, Ivo, I had him here recently. He was going to do his exhibition in this hotel.
Oh, because he's done a lovely book, hasn't he?
That's right. So he came over here and sort of checked the place out. Didn't quite end up working out, but I basically spent an hour and a half with the guy. He is the sweetest man.
I dare say.
He is such a sweet guy. And I can only imagine the sort of mental strength it must have taken to get through that. It sounded messy and horrible and out of his control. And to fucking become the man he has is so fucking admirable.
That's interesting, because I, for all my claims to have been, reading every detail of this in the NME, I don't remember. There
wasn't really an answer. It wasn't ever really explained until he's done a few podcasts of late going into more detail.
Did he? I thought that he elected to leave because it was too stressful.
No, it wasn't quite the case. I think that's the answer they gave. But it's not my story to tell. But he mentions it in a few other podcasts and stuff. So
yeah, that is tough then.
Yeah,
of course.
But he's a great guy. So Andy, if you're listening, love your work, brother.
Because that's one of the I again, this is where I'm a teenager, sort of obsessing over this more than anything else in my life, about the bands and the songs and their lives and their decisions, and way before I've made any really hard decisions in my life, or sort of dumped anyone, or been dumped, or made any professional decisions.
I want to give her a snog then.
Yes, exactly. And so I'm like, and so a band, someone leaving a band, and what's sort of going on, and I can't really think of any, many comparisons really. The XX maybe, even though they never meant as much to me, but the XX were a 4 who became a 3, and that 3 have become sort of quite iconic individuals in their different individual ways and collectively. And it's like, I remember going back to those early days of the XX recently for something and being like, oh yeah, there was a
fourth person.
And similarly, like Andy Nicholson is like that must be, if someone has won the lottery, then someone else has lost the lottery there.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Wow.
But yeah, so O'Malley is in, and he is driving this house as a circus.
Yeah. And Brian Storm, fucking hell.
Yeah. The only as a teenager who was obsessed with making mixtapes, sometimes for friends, sometimes for doomed crushes, sometimes just for myself, I wasn't sure that I liked the fact that This House is a Circus bled into If You Were There, Beware. I couldn't decide whether I thought that was really cool and I had to take them as a two, or whether they were sort of like, or whether that was just something that the recipients of my mixtapes were going to have to deal with. That
if that's as bad as life got in 2007, Ivo, fucking hell.
I'm just, listen, are we not here to discuss the minutiae of listen, it's not Eyes of the World on the third Strokes album, cutting out, sort of randomly at the end of the song. But so that's happening. And If You Were There, Beware is a phenomenal song as well.
Weird song, isn't it?
But that's got like so many brilliant thrilling chapters to it as well.
Chapters the right word for it,
and it's got this, very... to me, I was emboldened by enough reviews saying the Arctic Monkeys are phenomenal, this is generational stuff, to feel confident in my own hyperbole. But also, I had almost nothing to compare it with. It was, I was a teenager, so disproportionately excited by anything. But
that's the thing with 2007s, isn't it? I mean, you
only... What is it exactly? You never get enough of them.
You only get one.
But to me, any decision that the Arctic Monkeys made on that album denoted confidence. There was almost no such thing as a misstep. So when If You Were There, Beware suddenly bins off its main thrust, and he's suddenly, singing in this sort of disembodied way, I don't know what it is that you want, but I haven't got it to give. I'm like, now he's doing this. Brilliant. And then the song sort of comes back in with its slightly sort of thuggish, not quite as good as This House is a Circus, but like, I'm on for all of it. And then I'm not too fussed by the bad thing. I don't have as much gripe with it as some people on Reddit. I love Old Yellow Bricks, but it's not essential.
It's good. It's good.
And then it's 505, which speaks for itself. Yeah, it's such a good album. But for me, Do Me a Favour is unparalleled for me. And again, maybe it's just because quite early on I clocked that everyone else was saying 505 was the sort of big step up maturity wise, so I decided that I had a different answer. But I think at the time, what was your main music publication of choice in 2007?
It was The Enemy.
Yeah. So, as I say, I was either already subscribing or soon to subscribe, but I reckon I might still have been on the Q wagon because I can almost date it by which magazine I can quote verbatim. And I think in 2007, I'm still remembering more vividly the Q review, which says Q loved Brainstorm. I think they give it 5 stars, the album, and they love Brainstorm. And then they say any of the next 3 could be the second single until Fluorescent Adolescent arrives. And then it's like, no, this is the second single. and then they were very positive about Do Me a Favour. And so then suddenly that's my favourite. But I remember the NME covers as well, because I remember a lot of clown makeup. I remember the Richard Ayoade directed Fluorescent Adolescent video.
Whatever happened to that guy in the video?
We're talking about my namesake Stephen Graham.
Stephen Graham, yeah. Whatever happened to him?
I listen. He peaked. I think we can agree he peaked.
Yeah.
Very sad.
Hope you're well, Steve.
Hope you're well. I think we're recording this 2 days after we've won a BAFTA for Adolescence.
Yes. But there was that.
But if we're talking about my own toxic teenage masculinity, it was directed solely at my gripes with Q and the NME. It was a simpler time.
Have you ever cried listening to this album, Ivo Graham?
I don't think so. It's a lovely question, but I don't think so. I don't actually think I've ever cried listening to an Arctic Monkeys song.
Are you a crier?
Yeah, and I think I've cried a lot more in my sort of middle age, in my sort of soppy, stuff to do with my daughter, stuff to do with the inevitable rigors of adult life. But I think as a teenager, I did cry occasionally. I'm afraid to say sometimes I cried because I fancied people and didn't fancy me back, and I knew which songs I went to. And the song I went to more than any other was This Modern Love by Bloc Party. Which is a stunning song.
It's my favourite Bloc Party song, so don't worry, Ivo. I'm with you.
And I sort of, I don't want to keep sort of sticking it to Bloc Party.
On the firing line today, aren't they?
Well, only because, again, and it's not just a caveat to say, it's, let's not be rude to one-hit wonders because they had the hit, many don't. And, to have fallen that far, it's only because the peak was so high. I could, Silent Alarm is a phenomenal piece of work. And I love the second album and many more songs off the later albums as well. But This Modern Love, I thought it was just a breathtakingly beautiful song with so many different chapters within it as well. And actually, that then becoming almost quite a sort of like a mainstream Bloc Party song. I remember it was in Saltburn.
Oh, was it?
I think it was in Saltburn, and I was already having a few wrestles with how much I was enjoying the sort of toxic university nostalgia.
Sure.
That I wasn't as delighted to hear it in Saltburn as I thought I would be, but it was still like, no, I don't want this song to be in a big film. I want it only to be the song that I walked around my parents' garden to when I was like staring at my Nokia 3210, thinking about the text back I wasn't getting. And I don't think there was an Arctic Monkey song I would have gone to in those times. I think actually obviously Only Ones Who Know is very moving. And 505 and Do Me a Favour are very moving, but they're sort of more like I keep using the word cinematic, but like cinematic odysseys. I think the ballads at the end of Suck It and See are the most emotional, I feel, because they're stunning songs. They are, in some cases, they're associated with the Submarine soundtrack as well. In some cases, in Piledriver Waltz, you've got the same song, two different versions. But I remember being at the end of uni and finding Submarine so moving, being quite sad to be leaving uni. Like, all of that is actually, that's where I'm at my most emotional. I don't think anything before or since quite matches that. Have you cried to Favourite Worst Nightmare?
Well, it's quite relatable. I think they weren't a band I ever really cried to until I saw them on the AM era tour. I saw them at Earls Court. I saw them a few times that tour, but I saw them at Earls Court, and they did a really slowed down version of Mardy Bum.
Wow.
And something about that made me think like, oh man, this song's been a part of my life for a long time now. I've been in cover bands playing that song on stage with my friends. And it sort of took on a bit of a new life. And that was the first I ever cried to Arctic Monkeys. It's been a couple of times since, but like, they're not a band I cry to. They give me joy and all manner of other feelings, but it's rarely tears.
I completely
Bloc
get
Party,
that.
fucking hell.
Yeah. I would really, This Modern Love, and sometimes so Here We Are, and even and I still remember on the second Bloc Party album,
What a tune.
I really projected quite a lot of stuff onto that song as well. But I also completely get the crying because of what a song that realization of what a song has been to you in your life.
And the person I've become, and, looking back at the man I used to be.
Yeah, completely. And forgive my ignorance, and, because you probably referenced this specifically in the Arctic Monkeys episode you did, but what were you playing in the bands when you were playing?
I played the guitar.
So that's a lot. And is Mardy Bum the song you played more than any other Arctic Monkeys song?
I think it probably is. Just really fond memories of playing that song with my friends.
Of course. And friends who you also saw the band live with?
Not as much, but it's definitely a bond we shared. And maybe a bond that didn't exist anymore, Ivo.
Yeah, of course.
And, friendships come and go, don't they?
They do, but listen, if you want to dust off any of those old contacts for 20 years of nightmares, that's what this... I've that thing quite a lot with songs, and indeed now with specific song and album oriented club nights, where I love sending a sort of you have a memory of a song and a friend and you send it to them. And then, of course, what you'd love to do is make a plan, and your friend replies and says, how are you? And it's like, obviously, with infinite time, I would then like to restart this friendship and tell you about what life has been like for the last 20 years. But realistically, we can't catch up on all that. What I want to do is just jump back into a time machine to that specific moment with you. Feel so grateful that we've still got it, but I'm not like, I mean, it's a very damning, conclusion to reach, but you can't always make new memories with the same people. You can just go back to the old ones in sort of later on. But I've got no musical talent, so I've never played in bands, and I think that extra level of having played a song with people so many times, knowing that the nuts and bolts of a song, as having performed it, that must be a whole extra thing.
Yeah, it certainly was that night, definitely. Ivo Graham, this has been fucking phenomenal.
Well,
I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, I mean, I've apologised for this many times in my life without ever really improving on it, but I have wanged on a bit, and I'm sorry.
Mate, this is dreamland for me.
Okay.
Silly question. Is there anything we've not covered yet? Anything you'd like to discuss? Moments, memories, feelings?
I mean, there are so many Arctic Monkeys related questions, and it's such a pleasure to talk to, even amongst, many friends that I have stayed friends with or sought out because they're Arctic Monkeys fandom. You're top tier, William. You have walked the walk, and we did a Gig Pigs episode about the Arctic Monkeys with Alex's wife, Mari Beveridge, and she has walked the walk herself and has got an amazing story about queuing over or waiting overnight for the release of Favourite Worst Nightmare in, I think, Singapore, which is where she lived at the time. So shout out to Mari Beveridge, and I suppose if I may plug a sort of an old episode of my defunct pod, that's our contribution. But one of the many great Arctic Monkeys chats I've had with Mari is, what's your favourite Arctic Monkeys font?
Yes! Now we are getting somewhere.
Because for me, while you ponder, one of the things I'm not entirely sure about, I get that in life plans change. You can't, and the Arctic Monkeys, they're revolving musically, and also maybe a changing logo is a good way of just keeping the interest. But also, I quite like, with some of my favourite bands, that the logo's been the same all the way through. I like the continuity, even if the music evolves around it. And the Arctic Monkeys have basically had a different one every album, and some of them I've not liked. And I don't like the Favourite Worst Nightmare font.
I think that's fair. I think I've got a place in my heart for all of them. I don't think I dislike any of them quite as passionately as you. But I have got my answer for you, my correct answer. It's Suck It and See.
Yeah,
lovely. It's a lovely bit of font.
It's a lovely bit of font, and it is... I'm now enjoying just picturing the cover, which is just the word Suck It and See on that blank background. With Mari, we had all on a piece of paper in front of us, and the again, you also, what's so mad with Alex, what's so crazy about Alex Turner is you don't know which bits he has poured his heart and soul into, and which bits he is sort of pranking us with, and which bits, due to the necessities of time and the baggage of being a rock star, have just been farted out by someone at Domino.
Yeah.
It's like some of the, is Suck It and See's incredibly minimalist cover, is that a statement? Or is that just like, yeah, whatever? And, or is it something to do with the title, Suck It and See, which at the time I also found to be like quite I found Humbug a bit disappointing. Their first album I wasn't obsessed with. The rate of production had slowed as well. I'd now sort of, I'd left university, or was about to, sort of moving on a bit. And Suck and See ended up sucking me, no pun intended, back in, and I loved the particular second half of that album, and I loved Submarine. But by that point, I had started to have a thing, which I also have with the Strokes, where you would get the track listing before the album.
Yeah, well, that's the great example. Suck It and See. The track listing to that with no context.
I was like, what the fuck are these titles?
I can relate to this so much.
Don't Sit Down. I was like, yeah, I get that, song titles don't have to be short enough for me to write them onto my CD that I've burnt for my friend, even though that was helpful, and I didn't like... I love You Probably Couldn't See the Lights, but You Were Looking Straight at Me, but that's too long for a song. I was like, what? The song's called Don't Sit Down because I've moved your chair, and
Pile Driver Waltz was one that definitely...
I was like, what's that then?
What's that?
And the single was Brick by Brick, which is not necessarily a bad title in and of itself, but that song, I've actually warmed to it, but it's a bit of a dunderheaded prank of a song as well.
I think it's a bit of fun, and sometimes Arctic Monkeys are allowed to be a bit silly and fun.
And you're wearing your Helders shirt, and it's lovely
It's a Helders heavy number.
To hear Matt singing behind the drums.
It's nice to hear him say rock and roll 10 times, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's fine. But and it's this, it's the same with, as I say, some sort of Strokes titles. But what are the other ones in later Arctic Monkeys? The
world's first ever
monster truck front flip. And I was like, which ends up being like quite a moving song, and yet how much can you really invest in that? So I guess the same goes for the titles. And favourite worst nightmare, I'm embarrassed to say, I'm gonna have to get my phone here, because I went on the Wikipedia page for an album I've claimed to love more than almost any other, and I'm going on the Wikipedia page an hour before the pod, but I did.
That's okay.
To discover a fact that I had never known, which is that they also considered naming the album...
I think I know this. Lesbian Thursdays.
Lesbian Wednesdays. You've already remembered the more eye-catching word there. Yeah, Lesbian Wednesdays, and I won't waste your time on this as a quiz, but there are also two other potential names, which are... I'll try it with a couple of clues. Famous people with the initials GB. They're both GB. So one's the Prime Minister at the time,
Gordon Brown,
who apparently said, and Alex is particularly obsessed with this, that he likes to eat the Arctic Monkeys, really get him up in the morning. Great play for relevance. Slightly unconvincing play for relevance by a man who remains our greatest PM. Or another GB, a musician of sorts, although much more in the boy band sphere.
Giles Bramriff, of course.
It's Gary Barlow. So they consider them now Gordon Brown, Gary Barlow, or Lesbian Wednesdays. And I think I would struggle, even if the album was as good as it is, to be sat here being like, the album I want to talk to you more than any other is Lesbian Wednesdays by Arctic Monkeys.
Well, look, Ivo, this has been an absolute joy, man. This could be 4 or 5 hours, but we do have things to get on with, and we have one last feature of this show. Man, have I chosen well here, Ivo. I'm very happy of what I've done here. We're going to play a game of Fair Play Guys or Not Those Guys. So I've picked an album end of year list from 2007, the same year Favourite Worst Nightmare come out. Have I chosen well or have I chosen well? It's Q Magazine's top 20 albums of 2007.
Great.
So 2 questions really. Where did Arctic Monkeys chart and who was number 1? I've got a feeling you know this off the top of your head. I'm really excited by this.
2007.
What a year. You only get one of them.
Oh my God. Where did Arctic Monkeys place? I don't remember for sure, but I'm just going to take a swing at that one and say 3rd.
Shall we see how we get on? We're going to count down from 20. And we're going to play just Fair Play Guys or Not Those Guys. Quite simple stuff. At 20, The Rumble Strips, Girls and Weather.
I loved that album.
I had the album. I loved the single. Didn't like the rest of the album.
Too much brass, too much relentless brass. But I think the commitment to brass saves it from sort of pure landfill indie tag. I loved it. 19, Bjork, Volta. Don't know it at all, but you can't mess with Bjork.
You can't mess with Bjork, everyone knows that. At 18, it's possibly the best album ever made. It's LCD Sound System with Sound of Silver.
Yeah, can't argue with that at all.
The placement of being 18th can get in the fucking bin, though. Fuck that. That's disgraceful from Q.
We mustn't talk for 20 minutes about every individual album. I tried to be disciplined with Bjork.
Yeah, you've done well there.
I wonder if I can keep that up.
Swift,
and then it's Sound of Silver. But Sound of Silver, I didn't realise at the time, and I'd already enjoyed a lot of the first LCD album, but for example, LCD were playing on the Friday night at Open Air St Gallen, and I think it was partly because we were still getting in and like pitching our tents, but we didn't watch them. We pitched our tents and went to watch Klaxons, even though we could have done LCD and in Klaxons. I didn't appreciate what it was going to be, and as with so much of their meditations on aging, it's only become stronger every year. Yeah. I've got a poster in my room at home, and it's not like, it's in my bedroom and I've never taken it down. I've got a poster in my adult bedroom, which I framed and put up just a few weeks ago because I found it sort of under my bed in my childhood bedroom. And I was like, I think that's going in my adult bedroom. It's Sound of Silver, and get this is the only environment which I could boast about this, and even to you is pathetic. It says on it, includes North American Scum. It doesn't even mention All My Friends, because All My Friends hadn't even come out as a single yet. We didn't know what it was going to become. North American Scum was the lead single, and it actually has barely been played live since the reunion.
Yeah.
And to me, that timestamps the poster astonishingly. So
Wow.
we weren't ready. It's number 18.
All My Friends wasn't All My Friends yet.
No, it wasn't. It was just a good track a bit later in the album.
Wow, it really was a different time. It was a time when Q Magazine decided that Rilo Kiley's Under the Black Light was better than LCD Sound System's Sound of Silver.
Don't know
At
much
17.
about it, I'm afraid.
No, it's not all that. At 16, Manic Street Preachers, Send Away the Tigers.
I listened to that a lot in 2007.
Did you?
I don't,
Did you like it?
I think the Manic Street Preachers are deserving of a lot of respect, and I liked that it was their comeback album. And I was even though I had no history with Manic Street Preachers, and I was like, I'm glad they're back in the conversation, and that Your Love Alone is
Love Alone,
charting
yeah,
higher
of course
than
it is.
anything.
Yeah, it's great single.
And then Alex and I loved that they then followed it with that incredibly dark album full of Richie Edwards lyrics, and went to see that live in full at the Roundhouse. So yeah, I was on board for that.
Fair play. Guys, at 15, Interpol, Our Love to Admire. How are things on the West Coast?
They're not as good as the first two albums.
As good on the first two
unfortunately.
albums, yeah. We're still fair play, guys.
Still
that one.
fair play.
At 14, Cherry Ghost, Thirst for Romance.
I know nothing about that, I'm afraid.
Same. 12, Foo Fighters, Echoes, Silence, Patience, and Grace.
I actually know nothing about that either. Although, does
Yeah,
it
I
have
can't
the
feel what the singles were
Pretender
on that one. Maybe the Pretender. The Pretender might be earlier than
I've
that.
never been a
We
big
don't
Foos
know.
man.
We don't know. At 11, Modest Mouse, We Were Dead Before the Ship Even Sank.
Johnny Marr joins the party.
Was that Mar era?
That was the Marr album, and I loved that album.
We loved that album.
But I don't think it's better than Sound of Silver.
I think that's fair. At 10, Rufus Wainwright, Release the Stars.
We've got to respect Rufus Wainwright. I don't know that album.
I think that's fair. At 9, The Hold Steady with Boys and Girls in America.
I loved it at the time. I barely thought about it for about 20 years, and then I went to the Hold Steady Weekender a few weekends ago, and can't recommend it enough.
He's a Hold Steady guy.
You know that annual thing where
I'm
they
aware
basically
of
play
it.
that? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's great
pretty
fun.
class.
Lovely people.
Cut from the same cloth, I think. At 8, The Shins, Wincing the Night Away.
Q Magazine did a feature in, I guess, 2007, where they'd said, with that sort of definitive way that a teenager like me would just eat up, they said, these are the 10 biggest bands in the world right now, and the Hold Steady and the Shins were in the list, and I was like, I think they're lucky. I don't think they will be in the list for long. But yeah, I love that album.
But you
Shins
approve.
album.
Fair play, guys. At 7, Kings of Leon, Because of the Times.
It's a great crossover
It's
Kings
a
of Leon
good
album.
crossover Kings of
It's
Leon
the last
album.
one before the complete U2.
Before the full.
Jugular.
Before the Bloc Party level of full. Are we
It's
fair play,
it's
guys,
very
on that?
different.
That is a different thing.
It's very... No,
That is a
they
different
have two colossal singles and play arenas forever. But
Yeah,
but
that
sort
is
of,
different, isn't it? It is different to Bloc Party. No, mention it.
But anyway, go on.
Bruce Springsteen at number 6 with Magic. He's lit up. He's a Bruce guy.
I am, and we listen to that a lot as a family in the car, Radio Nowhere.
At 5, The Good, the Bad and the Queen with The Good, the Bad and the Queen.
Respect Damon album, but I can't
I
say
don't
listen
think
to
that's
that
the
a
test of
lot.
time, is it,
So
that
now we've
one?
got 4 albums
We've got
left.
4 albums to go.
Okay, so one of them is Favourite Worst Nightmare. One of them is Neon Bible. Must be. And then... I just go through Open Air St. Gallen 2007. I don't think one of them is going to be Yours Truly Angry Mob.
You're going to be kicking yourself pretty soon here.
But that would have been 2007. Klaxons.
Klaxons would have been 2007, yeah. Enemies, number 1, I think, wasn't it?
But if they're not in queues.
They're not. Well,
Let's
let's find out. Well, I've given it away, they're not.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to be kicking myself.
It's Radiohead at 4 with In Rainbows. Look at the kicking. Look at the kicking. The man can't stop kicking himself.
Wow.
I've never seen a man kick himself like it.
Wow. Yeah.
Unbelievable. You can redeem yourself pretty quickly here, though, Ivo. At number 3, it's, of course, Arctic Monkeys with Favourite Worst Nightmare. You was right the whole time. At 2, an album I listened to just last week, actually, and was very, very impressed by. The White Stripes with Icky Thump.
Lovely.
Lovely stuff. And as mentioned, Arcade Fire, Neon Bible at number
Bible
1.
is number 1. Okay, well, I'm embarrassed by In Rainbows, but I'm, some small dignity clawed back with Neon Bible.
That's balance.
And I think that's...
A metaphor for life in there somewhere, I don't know.
I think there's been quite a lot of metaphors for life over the last hour and a half, and I hope it's not been too excruciating to listen to them all. But I think that's a solid list from Q. Of course, we'd rearrange a bit of it with hindsight, and and Arcade Fire, I think, have disappointed in their own way since. But here we are still talking about the Arctic Monkeys, who have, to my mind, not made an album as good as Favourite Worst Nightmare, since Favourite Worst Nightmare, but the boldness exhibited on Favourite Worst Nightmare was a thrilling indicator of how many great chapters we still had to come. Thank
what
you
a beautiful
so
note to end
for
things
letting
on,
me rant
Ivo.
about it, William. And if I still owe you money, please do give me your bank's details and I will make you whole.
I look forward to that bank transfer. I've been William Han. He's been Ivo Graham. They've been Arctic Monkeys. And this has been this album.
What a pleasure.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Oh my God.
It's a dangerous thing to give a man too much license to